Hi there, I'm Jeremy. I'm from Change UK in Derby. At least I am at the moment. I've only been working for the company on voluntary basis for the last week for the party. I am an ex-physics teacher. I run my own solar panel business, and I also now currently a home dad looking after my kids at home. And I, whilst I've been at home, getting more and more annoyed about the B word, as I call it, and I wanted to stop it because I cannot understand why we're doing it as a country. So as soon as Change UK came along, I decided to try and get involved. So I volunteered over the last week or so to start campaigning for the party and try and explain to everybody how the EU works, why it works for us, and why it's much better that we remain in the EU. Okay, the first one has to be the reason the EU was set up in the first place, which is free trade around the EU and also globally. There's been lots of trade agreements built up over 40 years with the EU and with other countries internationally that enable us to trade at a much more efficient cost than we would have done otherwise. Then we've got freedom to travel, so that works both ways. We've got freedom for us as UK citizens to travel and work abroad in the EU without worrying about much passport control. We can just head off. And then the other way around is we've got freedom for European citizens to come here and work here, support our ageing population. We need more people than immigrants to come to the country. We need to be welcoming them, and if we've got freedom to travel, freedom of movement, then we can welcome people here. Third one I'd say probably would be workers' rights. So the EU puts in rules for the whole of the labour and rules for the whole of everybody across the EU, which makes the standards a lot better, makes it fairer for everybody. Things like maternity pay, paternity pay, working time directives, all that sort of stuff that we get from them. And then working together on international issues is key to it as well. So how are we going to tackle climate change on our own as a country? We can't really. We've got to work with other people, so we've got to build up trust with other countries and build up the agreement so that we're all working together on those big international issues. And then finally, consumer protection. So people are often mooning about all these EU rules and so on. A lot of them are there to protect us and are there to make our products better. So we've got product standards for stuff so that we know that anything we buy is going to be safe, it's going to be properly designed and so on. And if it wasn't, we've got consumer protection rights to make sure that we can go back to the manufacturers and we can take it back to the shop and so on. So I could keep going on about reasons to stay in the EU. It's a lot easier to say that than to say why we should leave. Okay, the people's vote is a way of deciding to remain in the EU. The other option is to say that the MPs would just decide to revoke the Article 50 and just cancel it altogether. The difficulty of that is, of course, we have had a first referendum, and there's a lot of people that did vote to leave the EU. Now, I'd hope that if we had a second referendum, currently the polls show that something like 57% of people are wanting to stay in the EU now. So to me, it's a lot fairer that those people now are recognised that they haven't been over the last few years. And I would hope that a people's vote would say, well, we've got to that now, we've voted again, democracy's moved on, we've all decided it was a bit of a silly idea, let's just move on, and hopefully people would accept that. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it's probably safer and better to at least do it through a vote than for just the MPs to make a decision for us. Okay, the Good Friday Agreement was a way of making sure that both people in Southern Ireland and Northern Ireland could have what they wanted to some extent. And so the people in Southern Ireland and the rest of Ireland who wanted unification of Ireland are able to freely travel and freely work wherever they like in Ireland, and are also allowed to have either a European or a British passport. So they can feel either European and Irish, or they can feel British, they can choose. It gives everybody their choice, and it means it works for everybody. The reason that works is because we're in the EU. It only works because we're in the EU, because we've got a single market and a customs union, which means that people are free to move and goods are free to travel either side of the border. If you take away either of those, you really can't have the Good Friday Agreement, because you're going to have a border there for customs, or you're going to have a border there for people, or whatever it is. You can't have it, so you need to have both. The only way we're going to maintain the Good Friday Agreement is with us staying in the European Union or at least agreements that we're going to be in a single market in the customs union, something like Norway, which Nigel Farage advocated originally when he came to the referendum. Again, it's about building trust. When we had the original referendum, there was nothing actually explained as to what leave was. So over the last 2 or 3 years, the aim has been to try and define leave. What do we mean? Are we leaving this part of the union? Are we using that? Are we having a customs union? Are we doing that? And it was never really discussed at the referendum as to what we were actually voting for. It was what we were voting against, perhaps, which is to be out of Europe, whatever that meant. But what we were actually voting for was never discussed. So we need another vote, really, now that we have got something to put to people and say, is this what you wanted? If it isn't, why on earth are we doing it? They're protected within the EU. There's an Erasmus scheme which enables international students to travel to our country. It gives a lot of funding to our universities, and similarly our UK citizens and students can travel abroad. So if we're in with the EU, we keep the Erasmus scheme, then that protects all of that for us. Okay, I mean the EU has so far tended to make deals with the larger countries. I suppose that's the obvious thing to do. However, we've got to start looking at how we can build up the developing countries as well and make sure that everyone in the world is doing better. So obviously fair trade is quite important in that respect. And I feel that, EU is constantly changing. People say it's a fixed thing. It certainly isn't. And it's always making new deals, making new agreements, and it's led by us as voters as to what they want to do. So if we want fair trade and we want to deal with other countries that are developing and help them to develop, we've got to put policies in and trading agreements in that enable them to do that. Okay, I don't know about Change UK specifically, but I just feel personally that we've got no overall plan as a country. We've got nothing sort of driving us and saying this is what we want to do, this is the positive vision that we've got for improving our country. We do need to build loads more houses, okay? We need them to be energy efficient houses. It's not like in the 30s where we said, right, we've really got to build hundreds of thousands of houses and we've got to do it and we've got the reason we've got to do it, and everyone chipped in to do it, because there's no goal. Everyone's disjointed and just divided, and it just needs a party, and I hope the Change UK party, to come along and say, come on everybody, let's just get on and do this. Okay, well, one of our MEP candidates in the East Midlands area is a guy called Joe LaPlana. He is a nurse in the NHS. He was Nurse of the Year in 2018, and he'd tell you a heck of a lot about the NHS and what he wants to do. But one of the main things is that at the moment we have lots of people coming in and supporting the NHS from abroad, and Joe's very concerned in particular, he's from Spain himself, that if we're not being opening and welcoming as a country, then we're not going to attract people in to come and work for us. Now obviously in the long term we also need to be investing in training and nurses in our own country, but for the moment we've got an ageing population, we need lots of people in the NHS, and that's what we need to do. There goes the bell. It's not an easy solution to tackle knife crime. I think a lot of it is going to be a slow start, but it's about trying to get people integrating back together again, interacting with each other more and trusting each other more. How you can do that, I don't know. It's a matter of building communities, joining community together, I don't know, whatever it is, having a different community events where people actually get to interact and mix and learn to trust in each other, having community centres, having youth clubs, having all that sort of stuff, that you get somewhere to go, somewhere to integrate, somewhere to get to know each other, and then hopefully build trust amongst each other so that you don't need to be carrying a knife. Okay, well, I mean, I personally would agree with having lots more community groups, lots more youth clubs, all that sort of stuff. I think it's important to get people to get to know each other. Change UK is a very new party. The main focus is on trying to stay in the EU at the moment, but there will be a party conference planned for later in the year, and at that sort of conference I would be there, hopefully, if I'm anything to do with it still, which I hope I am, advocating that sort of thing, and I'm sure that the party, it's a very positive group of people that I've met so far in the party, and I think that's the sort of thing that they would definitely be thinking about. Okay, climate change is a huge issue, but it can probably be broken down into about 4 or 5 areas that we need to be looking at. I used to run my own solar panel business, and I'm pretty familiar with the electricity generation side of things and how we can get zero carbon electricity generation, and that's obviously renewables, wind, battery storage, other forms of storage and so on. And we are now, amazingly, we're at about 30% renewables generally, so we're getting somewhere on the electricity side of things. That's one area. But the other 3 areas, which is essentially carbon emissions in transport, carbon emissions in industry and manufacturing, and then carbon emissions in housing and using energy to heat houses and heat businesses and so on. Really, we're still quite slow at starting to tackle that, and that's where we've got to start putting technology and plans in place to tackle those over the next few years. Is it possible by 2045? I don't know. I really hope so. We need to do it, and I think we need to take a lead on it in the UK. So I'd be, again, it's my personal view, what I'd be advocating is things like a national installation service where there's a company, a nationally based system which goes around insulating all the houses, and it's paid for by the taxpayer, so it can start in the areas where it's the most deprived and start to insulate the houses, where people are living in fuel poverty at the moment, and then hopefully drive it through and get all those insulated. Transport, again, it's a matter of investment in electricity charging points, in battery-powered cars and so on, all that sort of stuff. It's an ongoing thing, but we've got to start it now. It's a crisis if we don't. It's already a crisis if we don't. We've got 30 years or even less potentially to do all this stuff. And again, wasting our time on Brexit for 3 years really doesn't help. Single-use plastics, some of them could be phased out. I think some companies are starting to work on it. I guess if you had an EU regulation, it forces people and businesses to do stuff properly. So there is an opportunity to put through EU regulations about single-use plastics. However, I think there's still going to be plastics and single-use plastics by 2025. I think it'll be very difficult to wean ourselves off of that. And actually, to some extent, other forms of packaging and other forms of this, there's an argument that they use more energy or that they cause more food wastage and so on. So actually, to me, a lot of it is also about our country doing a lot more recycling. We haven't got a national recycling scheme. If you go to France, everywhere there's the same coloured bin. It says yellow bins for this, green bin for that, and so on. Here, it's like I'm in Derby. What do I put in my bin here? And it's different to Nottingham, and it's different to that. It's very confusing for people, and there's not been enough investment in recycling. Because if we did that, at least we're using the same plastic again. We're not getting more oil out of the ground, and we're using too much energy. I mean, one of the reasons I'm doing this is because it's for my kids. They're 16 and 14 now, and they're going to be growing up in this country that we've got coming up for us. And personally, as I say, I think we need to be investing in that sort of thing. But it's one of those things which, while we're focusing on Brexit, we can't really do. As soon as we get the party conference later in the year, we'll be able to look at these sort of things and say how much can we really invest in our youth, and how can we really start building our future for the country. Okay, well again, obviously the best thing for business is to stay within the EU. At the moment we've got free trade with our European partners, free trade agreements with lots of other countries around the world. What does that mean if we didn't have free trade? Let's say we had the WTO that's advocated by Nigel Farage. What that means is we've got tariffs that we charge other countries for stuff coming into us, and they charge us tariffs for stuff going to them. Now what does that mean for our business? Well, if we're paying tariffs, if our business is having to pay tariffs to sell stuff to the EU, our stuff is going to be more expensive. So why would a business stay here where they can be within the EU and a lot more competitive? So businesses will leave if we don't do that. Converse side is, if we're buying stuff, we have to buy it from somewhere. The majority of our stuff comes from the EU. If it's going to be more expensive if we're having to pay tariffs. Okay, so at the end of the day, tariffs aren't a good thing. That's why the thing about the WTO is to try and lower tariffs, trying to bring everything down towards a system of free trade agreements. It's not there at the moment. We have a free trade agreement already, though, with the EU and with Canada, with Singapore, Japan, all these other countries. So it's far better for business because we can trade within that area. So that's a simple answer, really, is we're going to lose jobs and so on if we don't stay within the EU. Yes, I believe the government put aside about £4 billion, which is, if you look in context, is about 800 billion that the government has to spend each year in total. So they put about £4 billion aside for preparing for no deal. I'm not quite sure how much of that they've spent. There was all sorts of bizarre stuff, as you might have heard, about spending on ferries by Chris Grayling and all this sort of stuff. All these things, all these extra telling businesses what's going to happen with no deal when it may not happen. Now, if they just said, we're not going to do no deal, no matter what, we would have saved all that money. Okay, a lot of people say that we spend too much money going to the EU, it's not worthwhile, we shouldn't be spending any money, all this sort of stuff, we just save ourselves some money. It's not true at all. It's about £8 billion a year that we spend, which is something around about 1% of our total spend as a country, as a government. And that works out between about £3 and £6 a year for most average sort of taxpayers and working people. So it's £6 a week. That's pretty much nothing. I mean, that's the cost of a beer. It's cost of less than the cost of what you might pay on a TV subscription or whatever. So to me, it's far better to stay in the EU. We get a heck of a lot from it for that £3 to £6 a week, whatever it is. Cost of leaving, well, huge, because if we leave, we're going to be losing jobs. We're going to be losing businesses to come in the country. We lose out on all the things that we get from the EU, such as when we go there, how much does it cost you? How much is mobile roaming going to cost you when we go abroad? That's probably going to cost you more than a few quid when you're out there. That's that sort of saving. There's also, how much is the insurance going to go up by the fact that you go on holiday there and you haven't got an European health insurance? It's going to cost you extra money. How much is it going to cost us as a country to invest in a new satellite system when we're not necessarily part of Galileo? How much is it going to cost us as a country to maintain our nuclear security, which we get within Euratom at the moment? The savings we get by sharing costs with everybody across the EU, because we're all doing there's no point 28 countries doing the same thing and all spending money on it when they can all share the cost of that and probably get a far better service as a result of it. And it's just an absolute nonsense when people say we spend too much money on the EU. I'll just give an example. I mean, let's say we all decided amongst me and my houses in my street, we said, oh, let's all buy one lawnmower so that we can all mow our grass, rather than us all buying a lawnmower so we've all got, which is basically what we've done. If we're a neighbourhood of families and we all buy one, we chip in for one lawnmower, it's not going to save us. It's going to be far cheaper for us all than everybody having their own lawnmower. And that's essentially what's going on in Europe. Is we've agreed over many years, we all need to do this. This is something we can all do. If we all chip in a little bit, it's going to save everybody some money. And it's far better to stay in the EU. There we go. Okay, well, I mean, obviously Change UK was set up as 100% main reason was that we want to stay in the EU. There's huge reasons why we should stay in the EU, and we're going to be far better off, as I've explained in the rest of the interview. And we get a heck of a lot more from it than we would pay, than the cost of what we pay into it. I think the other thing about it is staying in the EU helps us to shape future policy as well. So it gives us an idea of sort of trusting other people, of welcoming people to our country, of working together, of looking at how can we help everybody in the country, and how can we integrate people from different communities and so on. And I think that, but the fact that we want to integrate with Europe, it means we also want to integrate people within the UK as well. And I'm really hopeful that it'll change policies and change politics. The two-party system is very ideological based. It doesn't really necessarily look at the evidence. So we've brought together people from different parties. We've got people who've left from the Conservative Party, people who've left from the Labour Party. I've spoken to people who've joined the campaign group from the Lib Dems as well. I think it's just trying to bring together a new idea where let's look at what we can do and give us some goals as a country of how we can come together and work together. And why should we vote? It's important to vote always. Okay, everybody should always vote at the end of the day. The EU elections are not necessarily very well. There's not a very good turnout in the EU elections traditionally. So this is a real chance to say, come on, we do not want to leave the EU. We want to remain in the EU, and if we want to say that, we're going to have to vote for it, which means voting for Change UK, or even any other Remain parties, but seriously vote for Change UK, because I think it's a new thing which the other two Remain parties haven't necessarily galvanised that support that hopefully Change can.
I feel you should stay, really. But if you leave, you've got to have an agreement, because if you leave without an agreement, it very badly affects the Irish border, because it breaks the Good Friday Agreement, which took a long time to arrange. And I suspect if there's no agreement, there will be war again with the dissidents in the north, which affects everybody.
Myself, I believe that Britain should stay in the EU, because it would then be part of a major power group, which is very important in this world for trade purposes. There's America, there's China, and probably Russia, and they're going to make mincemeat of Britain if you leave.
Stay.
Yeah, I'm an immigrant, so I'm going to go with, yeah, we should stay.
And I'm not an immigrant, I'm British, grew up in New York, travelled all over the country and also all over the world, and I think that having these kind of boundaries just kind of gives a really negative message about borders and differences between people, and I think that Britain as an island, one of the really good things about us is that we're multicultural and we have lots of different people, and I think that since the vote, that kind of feeling has changed quite a lot, and I just don't think it's a very nice message. Yeah.
Stay.
Percent of the population voted to leave. That is what the government should be doing. Now, when you invoke Article 50 and you've got 2 years to do it, if they haven't come to an agreement by that time, you leave without an agreement. Simple as that. The Brexit is being negotiated by people who wanted to remain, and they're doing the best they can to stop it. So we should leave immediately.